In today's video, I'm going to go over what GitHub is and Git and how you can use this for your own business. So basically, Git and GitHub are pretty much two different things. You often might hear them used together. There are two different things. So back in 2022, when I was working on an app for someone from America, I had 3 solid weeks to a month of work in Flutter and Dart doing this Android mobile app. Back then, AI wasn't that good, and I still tried using it as well while I created the actual app. And what ended up happening was I actually broke the app and I couldn't actually bring it back to the version that it used to work. It just led me to this realization: whenever you do production work or like client work and you have sensitive information, you should always try and create a snapshot of the actual thing you are working on, so you can always go back to it in case it breaks. So that's what happened to me back then, and I'm telling you this story so if you're working on something important and you don't actually want to lose the data, you should always back it up. So basically how Git works is, think of it like taking a snapshot of your actual project, the thing you're working on right now. So it can be, you've just created a simple project, you have all your files in there, you take a snapshot of that. You add a few minor things to it, you take a snapshot of that, you add a few layers of abstractization upon it, and you want to save that as well. So right now you've got 3 versions that you can always go back to, and as the project grows, so do the saves of the actual project. If you're like 7 steps into the actual process of working on this, you can always go back if you messed up 3 steps ago. So that is one of the beautiful things about Git. How GitHub works, basically you can actually take the snapshot and actually store it somewhere where you can either use it on a different device, you can share it with someone else, or on the device you're actually working with, you can always go back to it. That's why I always recommend, if you're actually doing something important and you're in production, you should always try and save this as many times as possible, even if it's just small changes, especially when you're using AI. You don't want to mess this up at all. One caveat to this is just learn, and if you actually want me to cover this, just leave me a comment below and I'll work on it. But you should always do your own Git pushes. So what that means is always do your own saves and your own storage of the actual saves, so you know exactly what is saved and what is not, and you don't want the AI to be able to access those saves just in case it erases everything from there as well. So one of the best ways I actually like using the versioning system is semantic versioning, where you have the V and then 3 numbers, and the first number is the major and the second one is the minor and the third one is the patch. So whenever, for example, if I were to change the color of this dot right here and I want it to be this orange right here, that would be a patch. So it would be, if we're at version 0.0.3, that would be 0.0.4. And then, for example, if I wanted to have a bit more changes on this page, that would be 0.1.0. So basically the patch gets reset to 0 and then the minor gets added 1. So that is, and usually when you actually release a full app, that's when you just change the major. So you can be having tens, dozens, hundreds of minor patches, and you wouldn't even be hitting the actual major number just yet. So yeah, that's just one way of knowing how further ahead you are, and whenever you want to revert, it makes it so much easier. Now, this is the rule I work by. I already mentioned this. So everything that gets done for a client and needs proper saving, I always try and use a repo. Sometimes I might use 2 repos, and one would be for staging and one would be for production. So if you're actually working on a big project and you're making changes, and you break something, you don't want that to affect the actual live application or the live website. So you sometimes have to work with staging branches where you can actually test things and be sure they work properly before you actually push into production. And like if you go projects where you just want to learn things and you just want to move super fast, maybe you spawn 5, 10, 100 agents, you don't want to be thinking around and saving every little bit of it, you can just keep the full process. But always keep in mind, you can always lose everything just because something breaks in the code and it's not working anymore. Yeah, so that being said, thank you so much for watching, and yeah, just go make something worth saving. And yeah, if you got any other questions, just leave them in the comments below. Have a great day.